Hello everyone, in this mock paper walkthrough lesson we're going to be looking at fieldwork questions for the GCSE Geography Edexcel B paper 2. So we're going to work through some real exam questions step by step, and I'm going to show you exactly what examiners are looking for. You'll need to pause the video at some point. You may want to take notes. Of course you can fast forward and re-watch again as much as you need to or would like to. Okay, some things you need to know. First of all, the fieldwork questions in exam papers for this paper 2 are largely predictable. There is a lot to predict, but nothing is a surprise. What you will need and what geographers need is the same skills. It doesn't matter what the paper is really. So what we need to do is make sure that we're looking at the full breadth of types of questions that the examiners ask for. We'll break them down step by step. We're going to cover data presentation, interpretation of those results, improving methods, and evaluating fieldwork. So this is just one section of the Geography paper 2, and specifically looks at urban fieldwork and the fieldwork that you have done, although I have crammed in some other questions as well just to cover a little bit more content. So it covers all aspects. All right, let's start. So this is a real exam question. They're all real exam questions here. This is about the index. This is based on the index of multiple deprivation. So the command word you can see here is explain, which means that you have to give a reason, you have to develop it. So the question is about secondary data weaknesses, not about your fieldwork, not this one. Okay, so the figure is figure 10. The levels of multiple deprivation in walls of Sunderland in 2010. Explain one disadvantage of using the 2010 index of multiple deprivation as a source of secondary data. Okay, so as I've mentioned, this command word we're looking at is explain. So give a reason, you've got to develop it. The topic here is about secondary data weaknesses. What are the problems with secondary data? It's only 2 marks, and of course the focus here is IMD, so you need to make sure you're mentioning that as well. So an easy 2 marks to get, as long as you follow the correct structure. Following that structure requires you to do a couple of things. Make sure you identify one clear advantage, disadvantage, and then develop it. So say why it matters. This mark will get you a full 2 marks. The index of multiple deprivation is from 2010, so it's outdated or maybe outdated and not reflect current conditions in Sunderland. So that's the first point. I've said it's outdated. The second point I've done is I've developed. So if I've not said as it doesn't reflect current conditions, and then the final bit is linking into the quality of life patterns. So this means that the data may not accurately present present day variations in quality of life. It's a slightly different question, same paper, obviously same figure. We're looking for 2 marks. This isn't again about the data itself, it is about the presentation of that data. So in this case we're talking about a choropleth map. So it's asking you, the question is asking you to focus on the method of the presentation, not the data itself. Now to get to full marks, same as before, identify a disadvantage or a limitation, explain why it reduces accuracy or clarity. So a good model answer for this would be choropleth maps show data in large areas which can hide variations within each ward. This means differences in deprivation within an area may not be shown accurately. Now I want to show you the mark scheme as well. So whilst that will get you 2 marks, there's some other options as well. So I've highlighted that for you in yellow. The choropleth map uses one colour for the whole world, which means it looks like there are sudden changes at ward borders and ignores the gradual change of deprivation within the borders and across the borders. Now we move to improvements. State 2 ways students could improve the presentation of the 2010 index of multiple deprivation data, which we have just seen. So what's this asking you? It's just to state it, so you don't have to develop it. You just need just the 2 improvements. So how basically what it's asking is how do we make the data more detailed or easier to understand? Not so much interpreted, but to understand at this point. So A short answer could be this: use smaller scale data such as output areas instead of wards, because the way the area has been separated. Or a longer answer, so this is going to be your full 2 marks. The using smaller areas such as output areas would show more detailed variations in the deprivation rather than averaging data across large wards, making patterns of quality of life more accurate. Okay, so this is a sort of learning point as well. So although we're doing exam questions, it's not just about you learning and remembering the answers to these exam questions, it's about how we're approaching them. What is the exam question asking you, and is there any learning points you can get from it? So a learning point, I think, was a good point to make is what the wards are. So when we're looking at human geography, we look at population. Wards are large areas of thousands of people. The output areas are smaller street level. So if we want to do more detailed information, present the data more accurately, showing the changes in deprivation within the borders itself, we might look at output areas as well. Some other options that you could use and talk about is a heat map to show gradual change. And really the two differences here is that within the choropleth you've got sort of artificial blocky boundaries, where a heat map you might see a smoother, more realistic pattern. I'm going to show you another option here that was on the mark scheme, and an opportunity to talk to you guys about that as well. And this is GIS. So actually having a GIS created map, could you be able to present the data a lot more clearer as well? So GIS is about layers of data, so you might want to layer different data. So here is the map of Sutherland, taken from a GIS piece of software, and here it is layered with some more details around land use, and I think it's mainly land use there, but you can see how we've added a layer. So that's how you would answer that question there. Okay, now we move to a 4-mark question. Identify 2 wards from figure 10 that would be appropriate places to carry out the student's fieldwork. For each area, explain one reason why it would be appropriate. So nice 4-mark question. The question is testing whether you can read the map. So can you read it? Can you understand it? Can you select appropriate locations? Can you link it to the inquiry question, which was about the variation in the quality of life? That's what they were investigating there. You can see it at the bottom of figure 10. So as we always say, read the question. Your ability to get full marks here is to choose 2 wards from the map. Make sure they are different, so they're contrasted, and explain using deprivation and quality of life. So have a look at the map in a bit of detail. Now, obviously, you've got this map in front of you when you're in the exam hall. They're all printed out in colour like this, and they're very detailed. They might be a bit blurry on my screen, but that's obviously just enlarged. So what we're looking for is 2 wards that we can compare. So I've chosen Millfield. There are other options, but perhaps the explanation is the important thing. So I've chosen Millfield. It's a suitable location. It has because it is shown as a high deprived area. Look at the key on the right hand side, from dark purple to white. So we'll look at an area that's deprived. Now obviously we need to compare that. So another one would be Fulwell. Fulwell's inappropriate because it's because of the least deprived areas, allowing comparison with more deprived areas to investigate variation in quality of life. So it's about measuring. This is about measuring quality of life in high versus least deprived areas. You've got the map in front of you, so there's options there. We'll pass it for a 6-mark question. You might add a bit more detail in terms of if it's the fact that these 2 wards are quite near each other. So you wouldn't want to go from different ends of the county. Now we move to a really important question, 8-mark question. That intimidates students sometimes. I know there's no reason why any of you can't get 8 marks. 6, 7, and 8 on an 8-mark question is good. 8 marks, fantastic. Let's aim for that. All right, let's have a look at the question in a bit of detail. So you have carried out your own fieldwork investigating variations in the quality of life within urban areas. For the students I'm currently teaching in South London, we are doing Bromley. You might be doing another urban area somewhere in the UK. You obviously need to know about your field location and what you did and the research, the investigation you carried out. So we're going to go through some of these things, but like I said right at the beginning, a lot of the question areas and the topic areas are the same. So if you complete this PowerPoint, you're going to be in a really good, strong position to get high marks. It doesn't cover everything, but we're covering a lot, which will cover students from all over the country. All right, so what is the question really asking? We don't want to describe, we want to compare, and we want to judge. We're looking at relative importance. This is a evaluative question. Evaluate the relative importance of primary and secondary data in your investigation, which essentially is asking you which was more important and why. So you will have done this question in your schools already. How to get full marks. If you haven't done it, this is a chance to do it. How to get full marks. Use your primary data, explain your primary data, what and why it's useful. You'll explain your secondary data, then do the comparison, and then do the judgment. And I really highly recommend that you follow a structure on these big 8-mark questions. I've given you a simplified structure there. You can obviously put more into paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. The example that I'm going to show you is a model answer, which you can pause and read through, but you'll see that the structure is pretty much as I've laid out here. So, 8 marks, organising in three rough paragraphs, that's the best way to go. All right. So you'll pause this in a moment. I want you to have a look at it, and when you read it through, have a look at the comparison of the primary and secondary data that I've included. As I said, this is based on some work that my students are currently doing in Bromley. Link it to methods, apply to the real places. You'll know your real places. So anybody who's doing this syllabus across the UK will be able to answer this question in this style by just changing some of the detail. So I'll recommend you pause for a second and read through that. Okay, so we're going to do some questions from another paper from 2019. And the top right hand side you can see the process in geographical inquiry, starting with planning, collection, presentation, analysis, conclusions and evaluation. So that's the model for geographical inquiry. If you're not familiar with that, please get familiar with that. That's something you need to know and understand. Of course, if you're at this level and you're watching this video now, you will of course be aware of it. Okay, let's move on to the straight in 8-mark question. Assess the possible causes and consequences of this movement of graduates. So we're going to have a look at the deeper question around this now. So there's a lot to take in. There's a lot of data. To answer a question like that, we really need to understand what the data is asking. So let's examine it. Analyse the information in Figure 7, which shows information about what happens to graduates at selected UK universities and when they complete their studies. So at first glance, if you're not understanding the data you're looking at, I would just take a breath, just take your time, a few seconds and read it through. The top 5 universities and bottom 5 universities measured by the percentage of graduates who leave their university. So we can see for the top 5, in Exeter for example, 89% of graduates leave after graduation. So instead of staying in Exeter to work, they're going somewhere else. Now, what other data do we have on top of that? Well, we have the population of Exeter, 117,000. We also have the numbers of students at the university, which may be relevant to us for another question. If we look at London, it's a good example. We've got 25% of people that leave. So a large proportion, 75% of people, graduates stay in London after graduation, which is a good retention rate for graduates of London. So now, obviously, what does that mean? That means there must be more job opportunities. We can see it, the population. Obviously, the city is a lot bigger. Capital city is a lot bigger. So those are the main issues. All right. So let's have a look. So let's assess the possible causes and consequences of this movement of graduates. So there's a lot you can talk about in terms of the top 5 and the bottom 5, but it's already been organised for you. So that's kind of where you need to start really. So we're asking, or the examiner is asking, to assess, you need to explain, weigh up and make a judgment. This is about your judgment as to the causes and the consequences. So causes and consequences, and already you can see we're splitting the question up into two. So the topic is this: why graduates leave or stay. That's how you look at it, and what happens because of that. So what are the impacts or the consequences? So we're looking at causes, why are they leaving, or why they're staying, and what are the consequences? So what's happening? So sometimes it's useful to decode the question to find exactly what it's asking you. So don't forget, this is a good point where you can annotate and you can write on your exam paper to try and help you with this question. What you want to do here is to spot the patterns and trends. So I've already spoken about London and Exeter. You can see how the university is split into top 5 and bottom 5. So we've got some easy trends, and my recommendation is to write those trends down alongside in the exam hall on your paper. So we've got small cities, high percentage of people leaving. That's a quick note I'm going to put to myself on the exam paper. So Exeter 89, Warrington 87. Large cities, low percentage of graduates are leaving. So in London we have 25% and 40% in Manchester. Getting full marks here, obviously use the data. Where there is data, we use it from the figure. We explain the causes, explain the consequences, and make a judgment. So again, because we've got that split out, it makes it easier to structure our answer. So straight into it. Figure 7, I'm already using the data. Figure 7 shows that higher percentage of graduates leave smaller cities, such as Exeter and Warrington, whereas fewer leave larger cities, such as London and Manchester. So I've used the data. Second paragraph, I split into two just so it can be more easily read. One cause of this pattern is employment opportunities. Larger cities like London have more jobs, higher salaries, and more diverse industries, so graduates are more likely to stay. In contrast, smaller cities may have fewer high-skilled jobs, encouraging graduates to leave. So I've shown a cause and I've developed that explanation. Another cause is access to services and lifestyle opportunities. Larger cities, like London, offer better transport, entertainment, cultural opportunities, making them more attractive to young professionals. Now I would say, if the question is talking about cities and towns you don't know, you will have enough information on the exam paper for you to answer. More likely it's going to talk about big cities anyway. Now we're on to the consequence. A key consequence is small cities experience a brain drain. Businesses fail to employ skilled talent that may bring in new and innovative ideas. This may hold back economic growth and development. In contrast, larger cities benefit from a concentration of skilled workers, which can lead to economic growth but also increase pressure on housing and services. So I've given a clear consequence and I've developed that explanation. So the question itself is showing you the structure by giving you the causes and consequences. So final line is an evaluate question. Overall, employment opportunities are the most important factor as they strongly influence where graduates choose to live, which then leads to both positive and negative impacts. So providing that final judgment. So let's move back to your own fieldwork. So this is about your investigation into quality of life. Make sure you're using your fieldwork, and there will always be questions about this. This is important you do understand the fieldwork that you carried out, understand some of the questions that you will come across, which we'll cover now. Okay. So for me currently in South London, we are in Bromley. So our investigation was carried out in two areas of the London Borough of Bromley. Let's go to the first question. Explain one way in which you used quantitative data to measure differences in the environmental quality of your chosen area. So, what's it asking? It's an explain question. So we want method, how it measures, and it's asking about quantitative data. This is about numbers, data, not opinions. So it's basically, what did you do? How did it produce measurable differences? Model answer for you. One way we used quantitative data was an environmental quality survey where different factors such as litter and noise were scored from 1 to 5. This produced numerical data that allowed comparison of environmental quality between different locations. So some other acceptable answers could be, if you're doing traffic counts, you may have done that in your school. Noise measurements is a good one. A lot of schools do that, or pedestrian counts. So anything that produces number is your quantitative data. Next question. Using an annotated diagram that shows in one way which you presented the result of your data collection, explain your results. So 4 marks, so we need to make sure that we're doing this completely, but there are many options and many ways you can go. So I'm going to show you sort of 2 really. I think they're the most easiest really. You need to know about a presentation method, and you would have done these presentation methods already. So a bar chart, a graph, a sketch map. Annotate it, so you need to, by annotation we're explaining our results, so we're describing what it shows. Explain the pattern in the results, and also link that to the environmental quality differences. So your quality of life survey probably looks something like that. If you've done a questionnaire survey on the quality of your ask, and you're asking 5 different respondents what they thought, and you scored it, you probably had data like that. But of course, that's great. We've got a method of collecting data. Now we need to present it. So every method that you have used has produced data, and that data needs to be presented properly. The one we're most familiar with, of course, is a bar chart. Very relevant when you're comparing 2 areas. So we compared Bromley South to another area in Bromley called Downham. A radar graph, really good way to present data in an environmental quality survey. Or Wordle, which is another way to present data, depending on how you've collected that and what you've done. So the quantitative data, that's our environmental quality scores, a bar chart, radar graph. Qualitative is questionnaire, and words, or a Wordle, as you just saw there. Again, this is just a learning point before we get to answering this question. So just go through it, pause, go back. The information is here to help you answer the questions, but also to give you some additional learning points as well. So bar charts, what do? They compare locations. Line graphs are better for showing change. There's also another type of presentation you would have had a look at, and this would be in your secondary data. So this is a good example, crime data. This is available all over the UK, so this is a really good thing to talk about when you're asked about secondary data and secondary research that you've done. But this is all available on the Crime UK website, and this gives us sort of spatial patterns. In this case, it's crime. The presentation of data can be quite confusing when we're looking at all the different respondents and we are comparing. So there's a lot of details there, so we need to calculate some averages. So we've collated those and we've got a graph. Now it would be a fantastic thing if you could remember some section of this graph, or a graph that showed how you've looked at 2 different areas in terms of your urban fieldwork. And you may want to annotate it. I've given you a bit more detail than you need to hear really, but this is again just a learning point as how you might interpret this, how you might explain it. You also might get a graph like this for unseen fieldwork, so it's good to go over it in this way, in this style as well. So from this graph we can see that Bromley South generally has higher scores, and Downham we can see the brown or generally all high except for the last one. We can look at some comparisons. Both areas score highly for shops and services, so this is a strength in both locations. On this one, the transport links, there's a clear difference here. Bromley has much better transport links than Downham, according to the respondents we spoke to. On affordable housing, both areas score quite low, so housing affordability is a shared issue. So it's a really good point to mention as well. We can also see on our graph, once we've collected the data, put them onto separate graphs, then combine the average, get the mean average scores, we can actually interpret our data a bit better. So we can see very little difference here. Both areas are quite similar. And we can also see that Downham scores higher for a sense of community. So lots of variation, lots of information that we can gather from presenting the data in this way. Will obviously require some interpretation as well. All right. So that's one way you want to do it. Now let's go back to that question itself. Using an annotated diagram shows one way in which you presented the results. You may want to use a sketch map like this. So I know this is highly stylized, but this is something that we did. The most important thing is for you to, you'll know yourself what you visited, what it looks like. You know, I've got a lot of detail, but this is a very, very simple area that we had a look at in one area in Downham. And we've looked at where there was low EQS scores, medium and high EQS scores. The important thing here is if you do a sketch map, to write down where they are and obviously make sure they make sense. The examiner's not going to come and check check your data. It's about making sure that you can explain your data and from an annotated diagram. So that's the one we did in Downham. That's the one we did in Bromley. So again, just showing the meeting points, the EQS scores as well, and an explanation. Okay, so this question is about improving data collection. It's a very, very common question. It's an easy way to gain marks. So the question is really asking, what did you do and how could you make it better? So I'll put a model answer up for you on this one. So improvement question, as I said, it's one that you see very often. So it's pretty much the same answer. Different categories of improvements you can use. Worth sort of making a point of those, coming back and maybe writing them down or pausing the video now. So improvements, repeat measurements, more sites, different times, different days, and maybe using different people as well. Let's move on to some questions again in the area of fieldwork in the human environment. We're going to look at the fieldwork that's been done. So it's unseen fieldwork, fieldwork that's been carried out by somebody else, in this case a group of 20 students, carrying out environmental quality fieldwork in contrasting urban areas. That's lucky, that's what we do. Alright, let's look at the first question. Before we look at the details, I know I'm speeding through this bit, but you can always pause it. The first question is, calculate the total score for Lower Walton. So you can see there's two areas, there's Westgate and there's Lower Walton, and you can see the mean scores for 10 streets. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at scores, graffiti, traffic litter, and pavement quality, total scores, and you've got the range and you've got the mean as well. So we just need to do that calculation. So 1.5 plus 1.2 and minus 0.5 and minus 1 is 1.5, minus 1 and minus 1.5, sorry. And then do that calculation. Now you don't have to write up that, I've just written it like that. It's just to make it easy. In the exam, you would write it like that. Next question. Explain one method the students might have used to select the streets that they surveyed. Okay. One method students could have used is systematic sampling. They could select every third street along a route in each area. This ensures the streets are spread out and reduces bias. Other ones, sampling methods could have been random sampling, or it could have been stratified sampling. So if you're unfamiliar with this, probably worth having a look at sampling again in a bit of detail. But again, it's always going to be a question around this. Okay, next question. Suggest one way in which secondary data might have been used in this investigation. Okay, so just to give you a learning point, this is some of the secondary data that we used in my school in South London. We're looking at Downham and Bromley. We looked at the census data and the IMD index of multi-deprivation. So some more recent data. So the question asks, suggest one way secondary data might have been used in this investigation. So you could use, especially where they were looking at quality of life and what they saw in terms of graffiti, if you look at some of the categories, one secondary data they could use is crime and statistics data, so available on the police website. So that's a good secondary data to quote, which I talked about earlier. Other options which you may have used in your school or you may want to add is census data. So census data is quite good, quite detailed. Like if you look at the little paragraph at the top, it's explaining exactly what's going on in terms of population. You could use maps and GIS data. I've already spoken about that. And also traffic data again, which is available on the government website. Question 10D in this paper suggests 2 reasons why the students concluded that Westgate and Lower Walton had more differences than similarities. So you could talk about traffic noise, litter, or the overall pattern. Make sure you're using specific data. Make sure you use direct comparisons and clearly explain the difference. So I'm giving you a model answer here for you to pause the screen and have a look at. So just remember, questions like this where comparing locations, you get full marks for comparing locations. Use the data, explain differences, make sure you include a judgment. Okay, last big question. Well done for staying with me for this long. Again, this another big 8-mark question. You only get one of these questions, but we've now covered quite a few. You've conducted your own fieldwork into the reasons why the quality of life varies within an urban area. Assess the strengths and weaknesses of the methods that you use to collect your primary data. So this is about the strengths, what worked well, weaknesses, what could be improved, and then make sure you're using your Bromley or your urban fieldwork and make a judgment. It would be a good idea, if you haven't done this already, if you haven't got this already, is to have a look again at the fieldwork methods that you used for your urban fieldwork study and prepare a table like this. So these are the methods, the strength of the methods, why it matters, what are the weaknesses, and why the weaknesses matter. So it's important you perhaps do something like this. If you didn't do these 3, then there's other options as well. So just even if you did fieldwork, which is the one I'm not talking about, then you've obviously got some more detail that you can use. All right, let's go to that last question now for 8 marks. And just observe on this where you don't need to write a lot, but it's about making sure you're writing the right detail and in the right structure and the right way. So this is an 8-mark question. I would hope so. I wrote it. It explains strengths, weaknesses. It links to the field work. So try and structure your answers like this. Use clear explanations, real examples when you're talking about your own field work, of course, and practice these yourself. And good luck.